Crossover queens. The topic of competing in one pageant system before moving or crossing over to another is so hot right now. It's one that I've covered in one form or another before, in my Miss Universe previews and reviews, and in my comparison series a while back between Miss World and Miss Universe. But it's time for an updated and more comprehensive video on this subject. In a major way, this topic has been brought to the fore by multiple Miss Universe victories in recent years by crossover contestants, including our reigning 2024 Queen. As such, the fandom gets especially excited when their favourite queens announce or even hint at plans to have a second or third shot at international glory. Such is the desire to see them claim what they regard as a long-awaited and much-deserved crown. Usually, these plans involve a queen eyeing a tilt at Miss Universe, for the reason I just mentioned, but also because it's one of the most loved pageants around. For a while at least. Today's video is a comprehensive history of crossover queens, namely the women who've won a Big Six title, Miss World, Universe, International, Earth, Supranational or Grand International, having previously competed in another global pageant. I'll look at all known instances of crossover victories, the closest anyone has come to winning 2 Big Six titles, and some other fascinating trivia on this topic. We're about to dive right in, but before we do, just a quick reminder to please hit like, subscribe, and even super thanks if you enjoyed this video and my other content. Oh, and if you have an issue with me using the term or the grouping Big Six, feel free to stop this video in outrage right now. For everyone else, hello, I'm the Pageant Nerd. Thanks for joining me today. Now let's get started. To set the scene, let's have a quick TPN history lesson on the whole notion of crossover queens. Even though this subject is a frequently discussed one right now, beauty queens have been crossing over from one pageant system to another since the earliest international pageants began in the early 1950s, those being Miss World and Miss Universe, commonly known as the Alpha pageants. Miss International was first held in 1960, and wouldn't you know it, that competition's first winner had competed in Miss Universe earlier that year. I'll get to that iconic woman of the pageant world shortly. In many countries, one national title holder was sent to multiple international competitions during their reign, usually World and Universe, but sometimes International and one of the 2 Alphas. This was more feasible last century when there were only World, Universe and International as a legitimate top-tier international pageants, and even in the early 2000s when the major competitions were spread out more evenly across each year. Up until quite recently, the single winner of Miss France, Miss Russia and Miss South Africa, among others, competed in both Alphas in the same year. France remains one of the few notable pageant competing nations that continues to send its one national queen to both Alpha pageants, albeit in different years, especially since Miss France itself is also held in December, around the same time as Miss World and Miss Universe. In the case of Clémence Bourtineau, Miss France 2020, but crowned in December 2019, she competed in Miss Universe 2021 in December of that year, and again at Miss World 2023, held in March 2024, more than 4 years after winning her national crown. It's since 2001 we've seen the younger, currently popular pageants come into being, namely Miss Earth 24 years ago, followed by Supranational in 2009, Grand International in 2013, and Charm and Cosmo in the past year or two. More often than not, contestants these days need to win separate national titles to compete in multiple international pageants, as dictated by newer rules put in place by certain competitions. In other words, in years past, you'd often see a queen's crossover take place in the same calendar year, but crossover queens nowadays are more likely to compete internationally in separate pageant seasons. That's furthermore not helped by World and Universe both being held more recently at the end of the year, making it logistically impossible for the same woman to represent her country in both of that year's alphas. Anyway, enough of the scene setting. Let's take a look at the women who've won a Big Six title, having competed internationally beforehand. Many thanks to the incomparable pageant historian Julio Rodriguez Matute for helping me verify some of my research for this video. Your kindness and generosity is appreciated as always. By their sheer longevity, the most crossovers between Big Six pageants have happened between Miss World, Miss Universe and Miss International. And while Miss International is nearly a decade younger than the two alphas, it's in fact been the most generous in crowning crossover contenders. I'll get to that shortly. Starting with the two alphas, and while Miss Universe currently has no issue with crowning crossover queens, the same can't be said for Miss World. This actually represents a major turning of the tables. By the late 1970s, British-owned Miss World had crowned 7 women who'd previously contested Miss Universe, starting off with Venezuela's Susana Duim in 1955. Three of these 7 crossovers place first runner-up, notably Helen Morgan of Wales in 1974, who gave up her title after 4 days, and Bermuda's Gina Swainson in 1979. And here's a bonus notable crossover. 1979 British woman Carolyn Seward finished 1 place behind Gina Swainson at both Miss Universe and Miss World that year, placing second runner-up and first runner-up respectively. Over that same period up to the late 70s, Miss Universe had returned the favour just once. Lebanon's Georgina Risk won Miss Universe 1971 after going unplaced at Miss World the year before. But since that time, Miss Universe has crowned 6 Miss World crossovers, including 3 times since 2018. Catriona Gray, Andrea Meza, the only Miss Universe who placed first runner-up at Miss World, and Shanice Palacios. Such is Miss Universe's current affection for crossover queens that in 2020, both women in the top 2 were Miss World crossovers, and the second runner-up was a Miss Supranational runner-up. Conversely, Miss World has reciprocated just once since 1979, all the way back in 2001, with Nigeria's Agbani Darugo. And apparently this is no coincidence. For while there have been 3 Miss Universe crossovers who've placed first runner-up at Miss World since 2001, more on that shortly, Miss World is rumoured to be considering preventing women from entering their pageant if they've previously competed internationally. That rumoured rule doesn't seem to be in place just yet, as Cameroon's scheduled entrant for Miss World 2025, Issy Princess, placed top 20 at Miss Universe 2023 in El Salvador. Nonetheless, it makes recent rumours about Antonia Porcild, Miss Supranational 2019 and Miss Universe 2023 first runner-up, representing Thailand for a 3rd time at Miss World 2025, all the more intriguing. Before I get onto Miss International's crossover queens, I'll round out the alpha title holders who competed elsewhere before their victories. 2 Miss World winners were runners-up at Miss International, including its 1989 winner from Poland, who was first runner-up at Miss International earlier that year, while 3 other Miss Universes were crossovers of some sort. Dayanara Torres is the only Miss Universe who crossed over from Miss International. Lara Dutta didn't exactly compete in another Big Six pageant, but she is the only Miss Universe who's held another moderately well-known international crown, winning the minor Miss Intercontinental 1997 before her coronation in Cyprus 3 years later. And none other than our reigning Miss Universe 2024 is a crossover queen, Denmark's Victoria Kjær, making the top 20 at Miss Grand International 2022. Miss International is next, and indeed it's been the most generous of the top 3 legacy pageants two crossover queens, with at least 14 title holders having competed elsewhere before their winning runs. The very first Miss International in 1960, Stella Marquez of Colombia, had placed top 15 at Miss Universe earlier that year. Having married Filipino Jorge Leon Araneta in 1964, she's the long-standing chair and national director of Binibining Pilipinas, which for many years sent the Philippine bets to all the top 3 international competitions, but now only does so for Miss International. Now reverentially called Madame Stella, Marquez was the first of 7 Miss Universe crossovers to win Miss International, the most recent being Priscilla Perales in 2007, top 7 at Miss Universe 2006. Miss World crossovers have won Miss International 6 times, first in 1973 and again most recently by a Mexican woman, Ana Gabriela Espinoza, in 2009. Overall, the most recent crossover at Miss International is the 2022 winner from Germany, Jasmin Zellberg, who made top 15 at the minor Miss Globe in 2021 and went unplaced at Miss Supranational 2022. At this point, I want to give a shout out to the 5 women who've won one of the 3 longest running international pageants and placed first runner-up at another. And since it's never happened involving Miss Earth, which I'm getting to next, this record extends to the Big 4. Congrats to the 5 of you. Some other women have made the top 2 at multiple Big 4 and Big 6 pageants. I'll get to those a little later. Looking at the younger pageants, and Miss Earth has had 1 Big 6 crossover from Miss Universe, and 1 from the minor Miss Globe International, Brazil's Priscilla Mireles, who won both crowns in 2003 and 2004 respectively. Miss Universe has supplied 2 successful crossovers to Miss Supranational. Korean Jenny Kim and South Africa's Lalela Mswane won the Polish-owned competition in 2017 and 22 respectively, having both contested Miss Universe a year earlier. At Miss Supranational 2023, Ecuador's Andrea Aguilera became the 6th woman to place first runner-up at 1 Big 6 pageant before going on to win another. The inaugural Miss Grand International from Puerto Rico had competed in Miss World the previous year. And in an ultra-rare crossover by 1 woman between 3 pageants and 2 nations, Abina Apia won Miss Grand International 2020 representing the United States, having competed for Ghana at Miss Universe 2014 and Miss Earth 2019. She'd also tried unsuccessfully to compete for the USA at Miss World in 2017. A huge congrats to all these amazing women who've brought immense pride to their countries more than once. While many women have ended up competing for their country in 2, 3, 4, or even more international pageants, very, very few of them go on to win or come close in more than one. Of course, we've had multiple first runners-up at one pageant go on to win the other, as I've covered already, along with 2 cases of minor pageant winners upgrading to a Big 4 crown, Lara Dutta and Priscilla Mireles, but we've never had a woman win 2 Grand Slam Big 4 or Big 6 titles. As I touched on earlier, this very nearly happened in 2023, when Antonia Porcild won the right to represent Thailand at Miss Universe that year, after winning Miss Supranational in 2019. And were it not for Nicaragua's Shanice Palacios, herself a Miss World crossover, Antonia would have rewritten pageant history by winning an unprecedented 2nd Grand Slam crown. We've never had a winner of Miss Universe or Miss World take the unprecedented step of competing for another international crown. Indeed, it may well be impossible for them to do so based on the contracts they sign after winning their title. In addition to Antonia Porcild, a small group of Big 6 winners have made attempts to win another global pageant, but without much luck. Miss International 1986 from England, Miss International 2014 from Puerto Rico, Miss Supranational 2015 from Paraguay, Miss Grand International 2015 from Australia, and Miss Earth 2016 from Ecuador all entered or planned to enter their national pageants to crossover. In all cases, it was with the goal of competing at Miss Universe, with the exception of Miss International 1986, who was attempting to represent the United Kingdom at Miss World. None of them managed to win their national title, which makes Antonia's achievement all the more noteworthy. There are too many almost successful crossover queens to share a comprehensive list, but here's a quick look at some of the more recent examples of women who've nearly joined this exclusive Big Six crossover queen club, having finished first runner-up in their crossover attempt. There have indeed been multiple women who've represented their country in more than 2 international competitions. One of the more successful and prolific crossover queens in recent years is Nathalie den Dekker of the Netherlands. She went unplaced at Miss Supranational 2010, then in 2012 was top 15 at Miss World and unplaced at Miss Universe, while ending her pageant career on a high with a first runner-up finish at Miss International 2013. Can you think of any other prolific pageant queens? Leave them in the comments below. Looking further back in history, and here are 2 even rarer examples of women who narrowly missed winning a Big Four crown, not once, but twice, and both are from Nordic countries. Satu Carlotta Ostring of Finland placed first runner-up at Miss Universe 1966 and represented her country again at Miss International 1969 with exactly the same result. Denmark's Pia Rosenberg Larsen, wearing the same pink evening gown in both competitions, finished first runner-up at both Miss International and Miss World in the same year of 1986. We've seen a handful of other women who've come incredibly close to winning an international competition by placing first runner-up, then crossing over for another shot at ultimate glory, but falling short once again either at national or international level. My research has uncovered the following examples at the Big Six pageants, though I can't claim it's an exhaustive list. This excludes those queens that ended up winning their crossover pageant as covered earlier, and it's a list that seems to be ever growing, with a few queens noted here with double asterisks competing for national titles in 2025. We almost had another similar and tantalising crossover attempt by Martina Thorogood, Miss Venezuela in 1999. Under a new and short-lived format for Miss Venezuela at the time, Martina was set to compete at Miss World 1999 in London, and if she didn't win, she'd go on to contest Miss Universe 2000 in Cyprus. This was an attempt by the Miss Venezuela organisation to reverse a series of poor results from their queens at Miss World, who for many years had been the national first runner-up, with the winner going to Miss Universe. But as luck would have it, in the first year of this new arrangement, Martina Thorogood finished first runner-up at Miss World, which prevented her from competing at the Millennium Miss Universe, as she was on standby to assume the Miss World title if India's Yukta Mukhi resigned, which she didn't. Instead of sending Martina to Miss Universe, an emergency pageant was held to select Venezuela's entrant into Miss Universe 2000. It was won by Claudia Moreno, who finished first runner-up in Cyprus, coincidentally to another Indian woman, Lara Dutta, just as Martina Thorogood had done at Miss World. To this day, the most recent time Venezuela sent the same woman to both Miss World and Miss Universe was in the late 1950s, just a few years after Susanna Duim's exploits. Okay, that's it for my comprehensive look at the most iconic crossover queens of all time. Let me know in the comments below who your favourite crossover queens are, whether mentioned in this video or not. I'll be back soon with another video, but in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, the Pageant Nerd.